people who say Ruth's death was worse than Richie's forgot to drink their cup of implication coffee. Being split in two is a terribly gruesome way to go, but there's a vital difference between gruesome and horrible. Ruth's death seems worse on screen because we don't get to see Richie's death the same way we see hers. But the implications are fucking horrifying. Through Paul, the Langs told us once to think about the implications, so I've now decided to spend way too long thinking about way too many implications and making a way too long YouTube video about it. So without any further ado, ready? Let's go. If I asked, how does Richie die, most people would answer something like Bailey does.
Richie here got purple-nurpled and swirly to death!
Because that's what they draw our attention to. Those aspects of Richie's death were the bullying aspects, and, in some tragic irony, what the cops go on to joke a bit about.
They twisted his nipples off!
Face down in the fucking John. What a way to go.
But now I'd like to draw your attention to 5 other details that have gone far too untalked about.
Way to get a load of this mess! Sweetly Ralphed when he saw it!
I leave Chicago because of the blood and guts, and what do you know? They got him here too.
Multiple lacerations to the head and chest. Then finished the job by drowning him in the toilet. Penned in the victim's blood.
These 5 lines paint the beginning of our picture of Richie's death. Yes, the beginning, but the end of his complete death scene. Let's start with the 5th one on the list.
Penned in the victim's blood.
Why is no one talking about this? How have I never seen anyone point out the fact that Max wrote this in Richie's fucking blood? That is horrifying. The mere idea is bad enough on its own, but then when you take in the sheer size of the writing... While I don't think it's as big as it looks on the stage, I can't imagine it's the size of a notebook, the size you could write it in if your only source of blood was that you twisted someone's nipples off. For the sake of imagining horrible things, let's say Max wrote it this big. To write 18 letters, a full stop, and an underscore of this size, you'd need a shit ton of blood. Luckily and unfortunately, we know exactly where he got it, and it's not from the purple nurple.
Multiple lacerations to the head and chest.
Before watching Nerdy Prudes, I didn't know what this word meant, but then I looked it up, and Richie's death immediately got much worse. Oxford Language's definition of a laceration is a deep cut or tear in skin or flesh, which Richie got multiple of, in the head and chest. Evidently plenty enough and or deep enough to draw enough blood to pen the message on the wall. I don't even want to think of what Max used for these cuts. We could try to hope for something not too bad, but the first and second points on the earlier list of details would say otherwise.
Way to get a load of this mess! Sweetly Ralphed when he saw it!
I leave Chicago because of the blood and guts, and what do you know? They got him here too.
The second is quite self-explanatory, so let's talk about the first instead. Sweetly is referring to Sam Sweetly, Charlotte's husband who we meet in The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals and who we see again in the Nightmare Time episode Honey Queen. Sam's far from a good person, but the implication of him throwing up when he saw Richie's body gets worse when you consider what he himself has done. If you haven't seen the Nightmare Time episode Honey Queen and want to go into it without spoilers, skip to the timestamp now on screen. Anyone might throw up upon seeing a dead body, yes. A cop, slightly less likely. But Sam Sweetly is no regular cop, as we clearly see in Honey Queen. This man has zero qualms about killing an old woman by messing up her medications, kidnapping a 6-year-old, shooting a man several times, stalking him and threatening to kill him and his family just so his side piece can win Honey Queen. That's the man who saw Richie's body and threw up because of it. To say he's not squeamish is an understatement, yet the state Richie was in after his death was so grotesque that he vomited. Multiple cuts deep enough to bleed enough for this message will do that to some people. But now for it to get worse, because we still have one of the 5 details left.
Then finished the job by drowning him in the toilet.
But isn't this what I said people do talk about when it comes to Richie's death? Parts of it, yes, but let's look again.
Then finished the job by drowning him in the toilet. Then finished the job by drowning him in the toilet. Finish the job.
There's an absolutely horrifying possibility that Richie was alive for at least some of the lacerations. We don't know what exactly went down after we cut away from Max and Richie, so we can't know precisely what happened in what order, except that his nipples were twisted off before the drowning, and that the implications of finish the job by drowning him are anything but pleasant. So yeah, Richie's death was horrible, and I haven't even said a word about the torture that preceded it. Max quite clearly enjoys toying with his victims, which they even say out loud later.
Max is toying with us! He could end this at any time!
As a bully, it's typical of him. Before his death, teasing and bullying was what he lived to do, so it's no surprise that he carries on with it when he's a murdering ghost. Throughout many of Max's bullying scenes, we see that he enjoys the build-up just as much, if not more, than the kicker. He doesn't only show up to punch or kill. He enjoys his time teasing them before, and we see and know this extensively with Richie's death. There's more than a fair bit of it in the song Nerdy Prudes Must Die. He telekinetically throws Richie around, closes doors for him, and uses typical verbal bullying, like the lines about the math club versus smoke club, a lot. But the real kicker comes when you realize we've seen more of it. At the very beginning of the show, we see this.
Help! Somebody help me, please!
Richie, I'm coming for ya!
These are not scenes we see during Nerdy Prudes Must Die. This wasn't Richie's death, it was merely the beginning of it. We don't see Richie run and fall like this, or shout for help like that, neither do we hear the line, "I'm coming for ya." After this, Max presumably let Richie try to escape, emphasis on try. He opened the doors to the locker rooms and let Richie run into the hallways, screaming for help. Max is a predatory monster. The hunt is just as important for his satisfaction as the kill, which becomes extra emphasized when he's hunting down Steph and Pete. He clearly has nothing against dragging his kills out for hours just for the fun of it. Ruth got off easy on that front, with her death only taking a minute and a half. Max let Richie's terror fester even longer, and he let him merge with a desperate sense of hope of escape. He'd never get this though, which Max could easily make sure of. No one would hear Richie scream because the rest of the school was at the big, important, loud football game. Max could stop Richie from escaping by closing any door he pleased. He tortured him with false hope at the same time as he cornered him into running towards his own death in the bathroom. We can't say for sure how long this went on, as it all depends on at what time the football game started and on how accurate the coroner's estimated time of death was. The research I did and the friends I asked mostly said that a high school football game starts between 6 and 7:30 p.m, and Corey's officer said that the coroner put the time of death at 8 p.m. If Richie was really unfortunate, this torture could have been going on for up to an hour, or even 2. Most of what we see of Richie's death is in the song Nerdy Prudes Must Die, so we'll be spending the rest of the video dissecting the song, particularly one line. Place your bets now on what line that'll be. But first, we'll start with a question. Why did Max wait so long before he started killing? An entire 2 weeks passed between his death and his first kill. But why? Max isn't killing for revenge. He says this in different ways multiple times, but none as clear as...
You think I seek revenge? I could give 2 shits that you buried and left me. You filed my body.
Had this been a revenge mission, I have no doubts that he would have killed at the first opportunity he got. In that case, he probably would have gone for Steph, Pete, or Ruth first, and he would have given them a worse death. Steph lured him and tricked him to the Wayland place. Pete was the ghost and Ruth was a skeleton. Plus, she cut his nipples off. According to John Madison in his Nerdy Prudes Watch Party livestream, out of the nerds, Richie felt the worst about what they did to Max. I'd say Richie's lines and acting during Bury the Bully backed this up fairly well.
Oh no, she's snapping again. I think I'm gonna throw up. Oh, my ass was back.
All this considered, Richie as the first and worst victim seems illogical, even when you subtract any potential revenge aspects. The answer to the earlier question is Max had no reason to kill any of the nerds until now. So what's so special about right now? At first, Richie in the locker rooms might seem like a random victim at a random time, but looking at what happened right before it gives you all the answers. The whole beginning of this video seems like an unreasonably long and cruel death for someone who's nothing but a random victim at a random time, especially considering his second kill only takes a minute and a half. No, something triggered him to kill Richie like this right now, and I'm fairly certain it's this.
Richie, get over here!
Really? You want me in the huddle?
We don't want you here. We need you here. Richie, we're sorry for bullying you for all those years.
Yeah, sorry. Man, I love those guys. They're my bros for life.
Over the past 2 weeks, the hierarchy Max established at Hatchetfield High has been falling apart. Without him there ensuring it stays strong, it's been slipping away and the students have all started becoming equals. Max was the king of the school. Watching his work come undone is like watching his kingdom crumble. The peasants are happy instead of cowering in fear, and the nobles are talking to them like they're all on the same level. Max is undoubtedly furious about this, but until the day of the big game, it at least seemed like his royal knights remained on his side. It's pretty clear that this is the first time during the 2 weeks the football team has apologized and been directly nice to Richie. When they call him into the huddle, Richie resorts to a comfort stim, briefly wondering if they're joking. He has this look of delighted surprise on his face the entire time, and this is clearly the first time they've apologized or attempted to include him. Jason and Kyle inviting Richie into the team huddle is the moment Max's kingdom falls, and the moment Richie loses everything, even though he doesn't know it yet. Max loses control of Hatchetfield High the moment his old teammates, his old friends, declare that they're not gonna bully the nerds anymore. Max didn't go for Richie first because he was at the top of the list of revenge victims, or because Richie was the nerdiest or the prudiest. Richie was his first and cruelest victim because Max's old friends turned their backs on him by accepting Richie as a part of the team. It's Max's feelings of betrayal that make him attack specifically Richie specifically now. This is what pushed him off the edge. Lord, I gotta analyze Max. If you compare what Max says before Richie's death...
Oh, I remember what I said. Do you? You fucking nerd!
And Ruth's death...
What's the matter, Ruth? Having a little stage fright?
Max! Jägerman!
One seems considerably more angry and personally charged. He's enjoying these kills in entirely different ways. Ruth's death is fun for him. He's having a good time making countless jokes while brutally murdering her. Richie's death, on the other hand, he's enjoying because of what it's giving him. When Max died, he lost not only his life, but also all ability of control. As we see many times throughout the story, Max has a god complex. He controls everything and he thinks he gets to decide everything about everyone. This is confirmed to him several times when everyone complies to what he decides. Max says Kyle can't date Brenda, so Kyle doesn't date Brenda. He says Pete can't hang out with Steph, and what does Pete do? He tries to avoid Steph. What the 2 weeks between his death and his return show to Max is that he can lose his control just as easily as he can establish it. Therefore, the entirety of the song Nerdy Prudes Must Die is him taking back control in every way he can. If Hatchetfield High thinks they can take away the control he had over it, he's gonna show them that fuck no, he is still their god. He uses Richie to reclaim what he lost, and he does it in countless ways. Using his ghostly telekinesis, he 1. Controls where Richie can go by shutting doors for him, and 2. How he moves by lifting him, dropping him, and causing him to fall. Through all the little stints of bullying, he re-establishes that he controls Richie's social status. You could even say he takes control of Richie's own name. He doesn't use the derogatory nickname Shitlips anymore. Every time he uses Richie's name, it's either in a teasingly spooky way,
Richie,
or a mocking way.
Richie.
Shitlips would get the bullying done, but instead Max chooses to use Richie's own name against him, simply because he can. Last but not least, Max shows how he once again has complete control by controlling exactly what Richie says.
I want you to repeat after me. Okay.
Losing his friends was the final thing that pushed him over the edge. If the people who assisted him in bullying the nerds are now including the nerds and apologizing to them, Max's hold of Hatchetfield High has wavered entirely. He's lost control of the nerds and thus he needs to take it back. His methods come from its last words, Nerdy Prudes Must Die, as well as the line,
You're too weak to be enslaved!
In Max's opinion, being physically strong, being into normal things, and being stereotypically cool is what makes someone strong. All the people he deems as nerds are so far away from this that they can't even be changed to become strong. Instead, they need to be wiped out before everyone forgets that Max Jägerman is supposed to control Hatchetfield High. Being the nerd who settled Max's loss of control, it's no wonder Richie, as the first victim, got the full taking back control treatment. Except it doesn't go as smoothly as Max had expected. Richie shakes free of his control. The moment he says something that wasn't prompted by Max, the singing stops immediately.
This is the consequence for what you've done. What did you say?
What John Madison has confirmed about this line is that Richie is trying to use some anime story logic to poke a hole in Max's logic. Max tells him that he's not out for revenge, that he thinks Nerdy Prudes must die, and finally that this is the consequence of what he's done. This consequence can't be for killing him since revenge is off the table, meaning this is Richie's consequence simply for being a nerd. Max wants losers and nerdy prudes to die, so if Richie declares that he's not a loser and a nerdy prude, Max can't kill him for being one. Right? Well...
Of course not! Richie. But you have lost everything.
The word loser is primarily used with two different meanings. Both are used in Nerdy Prudes Must Die, one literally and one symbolically. Let's, for a moment, look closer. First, there's the way most teenagers use the word, especially in the context of teasing and bullying. A loser is someone who's not cool. It's someone who doesn't fit in, who might be a bit pathetic, and who doesn't fit societal norms. If you call someone a loser, it means you have a low opinion of them. They're lesser than you. The I'm not a loser motif is used several times in Nerdy Prudes, and it's almost always in the context of this definition. The first time the full I'm not a loser line comes up, it's in Cool as I Think I Am.
If I can finally be cool, I will know that I'm not a loser.
Here it's something hopeful. Pete's reflecting on himself and his status as a nerd and a loser. Now that he's going to hang out with Stephanie Lauder, he's considering how that status could change. If he can hang out with someone like Steph, then maybe he'll finally be cool and thereby won't be a loser anymore. In the song Nerdy Prudes Must Die, the line is anything but a hopeful wish. Both times Richie says the line I'm not a loser, it's in desperation, terror and defiance. He's not pondering the hopeful wish that maybe I'll stop being a loser now. He's grasping at any straws he can in desperate attempts to make Max spare his life. Richie's using the word in the typical bullying fashion. He's using it the same way Max presumably has for a long time. If we're to assume he and Ruth have been bullied by Max for as long as Pete, he's been made to feel like a loser for close to 8 years. This scream of defiance has been building up for a long time. Now that Richie's gained so much more life and acceptance, he's finally able to shout it. But the thing is, in some ways, Richie still is what would be defined as a typical loser. He's not strong or particularly skilled in commonly praised areas, he doesn't like the usual things 18-year-old boys do, he unironically uses words like waifu and NANI in day-to-day conversations. He still struggles with social cues and really he doesn't change much at all. The Richie in Go-Go Nighthawks is the same Richie as in High School is Killing Me. Richie hasn't changed. His environment has. Even if he'd still be a nerdy loser by societal standards, he's no longer a loser in the school size. Now that Max's hierarchy has fallen, Richie isn't a loser anymore. The people who once bullied him and looked down on him no longer do those things. He's no longer viewed as a loser and he's just started realizing and living according to that. He's not only saying I'm not a loser to convince Max not to kill him, he's also saying it for himself. The question is just, does he believe it? Was 2 weeks enough to undo the 8-ish years of hammering the loser title into his brain? Is I'm not a loser a statement of fact, or is it an attempt to convince both of them that it's true? Either way, this attempt at defying Max doesn't work. Why? Because of this scene.
Woo! How's that feel, Spankowski? Does it feel like I lost my power? You're not a nerd because of your glasses or your pimple dick. You're a nerd because I said so. I willed it into existence.
It's the same logic. These scenes follow the same structure. Max bullies Pete and Richie try to stand up to him to take his power away, and Max shows them clear as day that he has not lost his power. Richie's not a loser because he likes anime or because he has overactive sweat glands. He's a loser because Max said so. Max decides who's cool and who's not, and in his books, Richie is not cool. It wouldn't have mattered if Richie actually had changed, because that wouldn't have defeated Max's god complex. That he's not a loser in the eyes of the school doesn't matter if he's still a loser in Max's eyes. And unfortunately, he is. Max's god complex got endlessly worse when he got all his ghost powers. Even in death, he makes the rules at Hatchetfield High. He still brings the order, only now he does it by eliminating the nerds entirely. And this brings us to the second meaning of the word loser. The second definition is the literal one. A loser is someone who's lost everything. When Richie repeats that he's not a loser, Max responds by saying,
Of course not, Richie. But you have lost everything.
Here, Max is taking the term loser and using its literal definition, saying that the thing Richie has lost is everything. The interesting thing is that it would seem like Richie hasn't lost everything. Not yet. If anything, before this, it would seem like Richie has gained everything. He's accepted, he has more friends and more confidence, and he loves his life. But everything in this line refers to one of two things. It could refer to Richie's death, which he still hasn't lost by the time Max says the line, and considering the implications we explored earlier, he's not going to lose it for at least another while. Thus it would seem everything refers not to Richie's life itself, but to his right to live. When did Richie lose his right to live? Not here, but here.
Nerdy Prudes must die!
Now that we have everything sorted out, I think it's time to look back at Richie's death as a whole and figure out as best as we could what exactly happened. Let's construct a complete timeline. It all begins that night in the Wayland place, when Richie, Pete, Steph, Grace, and Ruth lure Max to the house, where a set of events leads to Max accidentally being impaled by planks. Before his death, he swears to kill all the Nerdy Prudes. Because of the spell the Waylands placed on the house, Max comes back as a ghost. Over the next 2 weeks, things improve drastically at Hatchetfield High now that they're rid of the biggest negative influence at the school. Max's hold of power of the school starts slipping as the popular students become friendlier and the nerds stop being viewed as outcasts. The big game between the Hatchetfield Nighthawks and the Clivesdale Chemists is set to begin somewhere between 6 and 7:30 p.m. Before the game starts, the Nighthawks huddle together. The final piece of Max's power slips out of his grip when his old football friends, Jason and Kyle, invite Richie into the huddle and apologize for bullying him. When Richie leaves to take a shower before the game, Max sees his opportunity and he takes it. He starts by taunting Richie, creepily saying his name and making him believe it's Jason and Kyle messing with him before he reveals himself. What follows is a long game of Max establishing that he's fully in control, not only of Richie himself, but of his life or death. He uses telekinesis to throw him around and trip him. Richie runs for his life, but it's to no avail when Max closes the locker room doors, trapping him in there with him. Soon, Max corners Richie on the ground, where he forces him to repeat after him some cryptic messages with horrifying implications. In the middle of this repeating, Richie gets an idea of one final move he could use to defy Max and stop him from killing him. If Max wants to kill all the losers and nerdy prudes, all Richie should theoretically have to do is declare that he isn't a loser and a nerdy prude. With all his might, he shouts that he's not a loser.
What did you say?
Unfortunately, Max doesn't abide by anyone's rules but his own. Since he thinks Richie's a nerdy prudy loser, Richie's final attempt at saving himself goes nowhere. From then on, it's all speculation using the few bits of information we have. At some point after the first physical attack we see at the very end of the song, Max opens the locker room doors. Richie's able to escape into the rest of the school, where he runs through the hallways screaming for help. Since everyone else is at the loud and important football game, they can't hear him. All the while, Max goes after him, teasing him and making sure he can't escape the school building. We don't know how long this goes on. The football game might have begun at any time between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m, and due to the possible inaccuracies in a coroner's estimated time of death, we can't be sure how accurate 8 p.m. is as the time of death. Richie's torture and death could have taken anywhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours. At some point during or at the end of the torture, Max inflicts several deep cuts and tears on Richie's head and chest, including but not limited to twisting his nipples off. Either Max spends the whole time cornering Richie into the bathrooms, or it was an impulse decision to drown him in the toilet when they ended up in the boys' room. Either way, Max finishes his first kill by drowning Richie in the toilet. We can assume, for our own well-being and sanity's sake, that Richie wasn't still alive when Max painted the message on the wall. The most likely course of events is that after Richie died, Max either used the blood he'd already drained, or drew more blood from more lacerations in order to write his message. It was the end of Richie Lipschitz's life, but merely the beginning of Max's mission to cleanse the world of Richie's kind. As he says, there will always be more Richies. Had he not been stopped, Max would have gone on to kill Steph, Pete, Reese, PJ, and then every nerd at Hatchetfield High, Sycamore, Clivesdale, and so forth. Richie had the misfortune of being his first kill, made by Max in pure rage of losing his control of Hatchetfield High to the nerds.
Bye.